Hey there, it's Mike Robbins here, and I am coming to you live on what's today? Tuesday, the 27th of October. It's 1 p.m. Pacific time as I'm recording this. And if you're joining on LinkedIn or on Facebook or on YouTube, nice to see you. Feel free to chime in on the comments and just let me know where you are, how you're doing, what's going on. If you're watching the video of this after the fact, feel free to do the same thing. Hey there, Meredith. Good to see you on YouTube. Thanks for joining. So today I want to talk about fairness, the importance of fairness. Now, admittedly, I'm thinking about this specifically because of what happened yesterday here in the United States. With respect to the Supreme Court and also with our presidential election coming up in a week. But it's not specifically about those things, although they're very important and significant. But I've just been thinking since I went to bed last night and I was reading some articles and watching some commentary and interviews. So as you probably know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the great, hey Deirdre, nice to see you. The great trailblazing Supreme Court justice passed away in, I think, mid-September. And Amy Coney Barrett was just approved as a new Supreme Court justice last night and sworn in at the White House. And so the background of this, maybe you're familiar with this, maybe you're not, and why this relates to fairness is since President Trump has taken office and been president the last 4 years, he's now named 3 justices to the Supreme Court, which have 9 justices. And it's a big deal politically and just with respect to the government here in the United States. But back in 2016, in February, I believe, early February, Antonin Scalia, who was a conservative Supreme Court justice, died suddenly. And Barack Obama was it was the beginning of the final year of his 8 years as president of the United States. And he nominated a judge to be considered as a potential Supreme Court justice, Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland, 60 years old, about sort of moderate in terms of his background. And he was going to be filling the seat that Antonin Scalia, a very conservative justice, filled. So obviously the Republicans and those on the conservative side did not want that seat to be filled by anybody, let alone by someone that Barack Obama nominated. So because they had control of the Senate at that time, and they still do, they said, we're not going to have a hearing. We're not going to take a vote. It's an election year. We can't do that. It was controversial because it was an election year technically, but it was 9 or 10 months before the election. The nominees hadn't even been picked for either party, although it looked like even at that time it was probably going to be Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. But the rationale that the Republicans gave at the time was that's not fair. The American people should be able to weigh in and decide. And the Democrats put up a fight and were very upset about it. But at the end of the day, there really wasn't anything they could do because the Republicans had control of the Senate. And the entire year went by with 8 justices on the Supreme Court. And then Donald Trump surprisingly won the election. And once he was the new president, he nominated Neil Gorsuch, who got confirmed and became a new Supreme Court justice. But Merrick Garland was never given a hearing or a vote and did not become a Supreme Court justice. So fast forward through the Trump administration, he also nominated Brett Kavanaugh, who was a very controversial pick. And there was a lot that happened about that nomination 2 years ago, but he eventually was confirmed barely on the Supreme Court. RBG dies. And then the Republicans decide we have to fill this seat now. It's our constitutional duty. So they came up with a nominee very quickly and went through the hearing process quickly, even with COVID, even with the president getting COVID and a few of the senators on the Judiciary Committee. They pushed as hard as they could to make sure. And on a party line vote last night, 52-48, Amy Coney Barrett was confirmed. Only one Republican, Susan Collins, did not vote for her to be confirmed. All the Democrats voted against her. All the Republicans, minus Susan Collins, voted for her. So there we have it. And now, again, look, my politics being very left-leaning, I have obviously a lot of very strong opinions about this. If your politics are different than mine, maybe you feel differently because maybe you're excited about Amy Coney Barrett getting a seat on the Supreme Court, a 48-year-old, very conservative justice with, an impressive record, but not a ton of experience as a judge. But it seemed and was, in my opinion, very partisan. And, technically, legally, constitutionally, they could do that, and they did it. But it just, the lack of fairness has been really bothering me. The amount of hypocrisy, saying 4 years ago, we can't have a vote on a Supreme Court justice during an election year when it's 10 months before the election, and then when it's a month and a half before the election, where people are literally, not just the elections happening in a week, but 60 plus million people have already voted, saying we're going to push this through when the Congress can't get aligned to even pass stimulus related to COVID, just seems incredibly hypocritical and just downright unfair. Now, again, this is probably colored by my political persuasion and what happened with Merrick Garland and now what happened with Amy Coney Barrett. And in both of those cases, politically speaking, the Republicans won and the Democrats lost. So yes, that colors how I think about things. But that said, is this fair? And what's the importance of fairness? What's the importance of operating with the same set of rules? I think about the election. Look, obviously I have strong feelings about the election. I was talking about that last week during the live that we did. But one of the biggest things that I'm most concerned about is all of the talk, and mostly, quite frankly, it's coming from Donald Trump, about the election not being fair, or it being rigged, or mail-in voting being corrupt, or people voting fraudulently, or and all of the research that we've seen is that's not true. But what we do know is, over the history of our country, there is a long history of voter suppression, particularly of minorities and women and people of color, of folks who are more historically disenfranchised. What we know is that a lot of things have happened just in the last number of years that seem to be pointing in the direction of wanting to suppress the vote. And it seems to be a partisan issue where Republicans seem to want less people to vote and Democrats seem to want more people to vote, which my concern, yes, I want Joe Biden to win the election, but more than anything is I want it to be fair. I want to know that when we cast our votes, our votes will be counted. And at the end of it, whoever is declared the winner actually won the election. So there's integrity to it. And we can look, if Donald Trump happens to win the election, which I hope doesn't happen, if he wins fair and square and he genuinely gets more votes and he gets more electoral college votes and he wins, I can be upset, I can be disappointed, but the process was fair. Everyone was given access to vote. Every vote was counted. And at the end of it, one person won and one person lost. I think that's in everyone's best interest. But it's had me think about this. And if I flipped it around, and if I were a Republican, and if I were conservative, and if I wanted conservative justices on the Supreme Court, and if I wanted Donald Trump or whoever the Republican nominee is to win the election, how would I feel if it felt like it was unfair, but it benefited my candidate or my side or right? Look, and it's a great question, right, Jonathan? Is life fair? Our kids are often caught up in what's fair. That's not fair. That's not fair. If you have children or if you remember being a child, that's often the conversation of, that's not fair. He got more than me. She got more than me. How come that happens? We hear it at my house. Our girls, well, they don't sing the That's Not Fair song a lot. That definitely comes up. I remember singing that song as a kid. And what did our parents teach us in some way, shape, or form? Life's not fair. It's not. It's not equal. Everything doesn't work out perfectly. I mean, some of the conversations I have with my daughters, my older daughter often thinks that it's not fair that her younger sister gets to do certain things earlier than she did, right? Hey, I didn't get to do that when I was that young. But of course, the younger one thinks the older one, it's not fair because she gets to do this and that. We have to explain to her she's older than you. But again, in life, in politics, in business, things are not fair. We don't all start at the same place. We don't all have access to the same things. Some of us have more privilege than others, right? And like Hassan talks about, justice has no party, Democratic nor Republicans. Absolutely, Hassan. And what's interesting, again, our politics or our opinions factor into this. Something that I talked about early in the year, I did a podcast episode about this. I think I might have done a Facebook Live about it. So the Houston Astros, as you may remember, baseball team from Houston, got in big trouble. And what came out of an investigation that was done by Major League Baseball is that they were caught stealing signs from the other team using technology, using cameras to see what pitch the catcher was calling, and then relaying that information to their teammates, to the hitter in the batter's box. Hey, bang on the trash can, a curveball's coming. That's an unfair advantage. That's cheating. Now, as a former baseball player, someone who played baseball in college and professionally, who played baseball for 18 of the first 25 years of my life, I played all those years. I was a pitcher. I know that cheating goes on in baseball. This seemed to be outside of the realm of normal cheating in baseball because technology was used. So people got all up in arms about it, right? The Astros won the World Series in 2017, made it back to the World Series in 2019, had the best record, one of the best records in baseball for 4 or 5 years in a row. Now, I am a big baseball fan. My good friend from college, AJ Hinch, happened to also be the manager of the Houston Astros. I'd been rooting for the Astros for 5 years. AJ lost his job. He got suspended and then lost his job, as did the general manager, Jeff Luhnow, of the Houston Astros. So I had a very strong feeling about what was happening. And my own personal interest, my own personal bias played into it. I did not condone what the Astros did. I do not agree what they did was the right thing. But what I do know is that cheating happens in baseball. It's not okay. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's right, but it happens. I don't think the Houston Astros are the only team in all of Major League Baseball doing what they did, but they got caught and they won the World Series and were one of the best teams in baseball for 4 or 5 years. So of course they're going to be held accountable for that. And that technically, and of course specifically, is not fair. The Los Angeles Dodgers, who lost to the Houston Astros in 2017, are back in the World Series. They're playing Game 6 tonight with a chance. If they win tonight, they win the World Series. If they lose tonight, they'll play Game 7 and have a chance to win it tomorrow night. They can win their first World Series title since 1988. They're playing the Tampa Bay Rays, who've never won. I say all of this because, again, how we feel about the people involved or the outcome or the situation often does color our perspective. But I think most of us would agree, whether we're Democrats or Republicans or independents, whether we're Americans or from another country in the world, whether we're Houston Astro fans or not, whether we care, most of us would agree it's in everyone's best interest for things to be fair. We live in a world that's clearly not fair on so many levels. But my belief, whether it's in America or any other country, whether it's in business or in sports, what we want to do is create an environment that moves as close to fairness as possible, because that benefits everybody ultimately. And when I think about this, again, I was thinking about this morning. And again, I don't mean to be holier than thou about this, right? Fairness is essential to all walks of life. The lack of it is a world challenge. Absolutely. Hassan, where do you live or where are you from? I'm curious. I appreciate the comments. It's absolutely true. But what we have to look at is like, look, if we get the outcome that we want in business, in life, in sports, in politics, in whatever, at home with our family, right? A little bit of unfairness that benefits us, usually we're okay about it or we can justify it. When we don't get what we want in our families, at work, in business, in sports, in life, in politics, the unfairness is, and look, let's be honest, there are certain things, the Astros stealing signs in Major League Baseball, even though that's not good, that's not right, I don't condone that. In the scheme of things, I don't think that's nearly the same thing as like suppressing people's votes or somehow having the election not be fair versus, one of our kids gets more cupcakes than the other kid, or one of our kids gets to do something at an earlier, we have these things are relative, right? Let's be honest about that. But right, to Deirdre's point, it can destroy the morale on a team. If it's unfair, if it's clearly unfair, if certain people get preferential treatment over others, which happens all the time, it destroys the morale of the team. People say, well, there's obviously a different set of rules for different people. Look, I saw this in sports. What would happen oftentimes, and this is tricky, the star of the team would get away with certain behavior that the non-stars didn't. We all kind of understand that. but it didn't seem fair. And for the coach to hold the star player accountable in the same way that he would hold the rest of us accountable actually benefited the morale of the team. This happens in business all the time. You know, the most talented person on the team, the hot top producer, the salesperson that brings in the most, you know, revenue, the relative of the executive or whatever, right? Look, we know that things aren't always fair and equal. And when we're talking about race and gender and orientation and background and status and class and all of these things, I mean, these can be really significant. Sometimes it's obvious. The bias or the lack of fairness is obvious and deliberate. Sometimes it's unconscious. It still happens. It still has impact. But I think it's important for us to really take a look at this. And as we are in the midst of this final week before this election here in the United States. And again, if you live in another country or somewhere else in the world, the American presidential election has an impact on the entire world, for better or worse. And as arrogant as that may be to say, I actually think that it's true. So I think there are a lot of people, not just those of us who were here in the US and who are voting, but people in other countries and other places. If Donald Trump gets reelected, that's a significant thing. If Joe Biden gets elected, that's a significant thing for a lot of different reasons. And you have your own political views, your own perspective on voting, who you want to win, who you're, all of that. But I think most of us would acknowledge it's a big deal. And I also hope that most of us want this election to be fair, to make sure that everybody who wants to vote can vote, to make sure every vote that's cast gets counted, to make sure at the end of all of it, the person that's declared the winner actually wins. Based on, you know, we have this system that is bizarre, right? Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump last time, but lost certain states. And then the Electoral College, the way we actually elect a president in the United States, he won because he won Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. That's the way it goes. George W. Bush got 500,000 less votes in 2000. And the vote in Florida was so close, it was fought over for weeks and ultimately a month, maybe month and a half, and was finally decided by the Supreme Court of the United States, which is why the Supreme Court, especially right now, is so important. And it was decided that Bush won the election, even though there were a lot of people on the Gore side that didn't think the way that it went down and the recount and the whole thing was fair. That doesn't benefit anyone. That had a negative impact on George W. Bush when he became president, on his presidency, and ultimately made it difficult. I don't want that to happen for our country. Do I want Joe Biden to win? Absolutely. Do I want him to win big? Yes. Do I want him to be declared the winner and have it be 100% clear to everyone involved, even those who were disappointed that he won? Yes. But if Donald Trump happens to win, it needs to be fair. We need to have confidence in the election. Because to Deirdre's point, with a team, if it's not fair, it diminishes the morale and can destroy it. For a country, a democratic country, a democracy like the United States, we need to be able to know that things are as fair as possible as it relates to what's going on in our electoral system. You think about the criminal justice system. A big issue that we're trying to grapple with here in the United States is realizing, wow, the criminal justice system is not fair. It's disproportionately problematic for people who don't look like me. That's not fair. That's a problem for all of us, not just those of us who are more significantly impacted, although it's clearly a problem for people who are significantly impacted and the family and friends and community of people that's the reality, but it actually diminishes the fairness of all of us. So the thing I was thinking about this morning is if I win, if you win, if we win, if we succeed and do it in an unfair way, how do we feel about that? Does that feel good? If you're a Republican senator, if you're a Republican congressperson, if you're a Republican political operative, if you're just a Republican voter, are you happy today with what happened with the Supreme Court? Yes, the outcome is probably something that makes you happy, but are you okay with the process? And relative to what happened 4 years ago, does it seem fair? Or do you even care? Just straight up. And then I have to ask myself the question, if the roles were reversed, right? Again, I think about this in terms of sports, which is a lot less important, a lot less serious, but the referee or the umpire makes a bad call. Look, one of the things we've done in sports, for better or worse, it's slowed down the game. Now in football, in basketball, in baseball, in all of the sports, there's instant replay. So they get the call right. There have been times, there was a situation, one of the things that prompted this to happen in baseball, the sports were all talking about this a number of years ago. And I think it was probably, I don't know, 10 years ago, give or take. There was a pitcher for the Detroit Tigers, I believe, whose name is escaping me, who was about to throw a perfect game. Perfect game means 27 up, 27 down. No one gets on base. No hits, no walks, no errors, no hit by pitch, nothing. 1, 2, I mean, that I pitched for 18 years. It's very, very hard to do. I threw a couple of no-hitters when I was really little, meaning no one else got hits, but there were some walks or some errors. Someone got on base. I've never thrown a perfect game. I think there's only been 27, 28-ish ever, maybe not even that many in the history of Major League Baseball. Like, these are incredibly rare. It happens once every few years at best. So a pitcher for the Tigers was about to throw this perfect game, and in the 9th inning, there was a play at first base, a ground ball. He ran over to cover the bag. The runner was clearly out, but the umpire called him safe for some unknown reason. Oh, it was Armando Galaraga. Thank you, James. And it was what year? Do you remember? Deirdre and James, thank you both for. It was the Tigers, right? And it was about 10 years ago, give or take. Anyway, you can look it up. I'll find the link. But anyway, maybe I'll find the YouTube video of the play. But the guy was clearly out. The umpire inexplicably called him safe. And it was, I think, the year before, or maybe 2 years before instant replay was instituted. There's no replay. There's no the other umpires can't overrule the call. And literally right in that moment, the pitcher, Galaraga, and the umpire both looked at each other, and like the pitcher was furious, like, what the? And you could see the umpire, he realized he'd made a bad call, but there was literally nothing he could do to make that right. Oh, it was 2012. Okay, so it was only 8 years ago. Thank you, James. See, this is good. We do this in real time. We can get it right. We can get it accurately. But in that case, he missed out on throwing a perfect game, and that umpire was like grief-stricken that he'd made that bad call, and there was no way to rectify the situation, to make it fair, to make it right. Now, that's baseball. That's a perfect game. In Armando Galaraga's life and in the history of baseball, it's kind of a big deal. But in the scheme of things, not that big of a deal. But we want to get things right. We want things to be fair so that the result can have integrity, so that we can live with ourselves and sleep easy at night to know I did everything I could. I played by the rules. It was fair and square. I won. I lost. We succeeded. We failed. But everybody is... Oh, it was June 2nd, 2010. Okay. Thank you, James. I was right. It was about 10 years ago. Okay, good. Look, the point being, fairness is super important. If you're in a leadership position, creating an environment where fairness is a value. Now, is it going to be perfectly fair all the time? Of course not. The world is unfair. There are inequities that exist, that are baked into the system, that are hard, if not impossible, for us to mitigate. But there are things that we can do as individuals, as leaders, as citizens, as people who care, to try to make things as fair as possible. And also to be aware when things are unfair and at least acknowledge it. Like in some ways, again, thinking about this Supreme Court thing, well, it probably would never happen just given the nature of modern American politics. It did start to come out, or it came out sideways in some comments. I actually would have respected, although been increasingly furious, if Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, and the other Senate Republicans just said, look, we realize this is completely hypocritical, totally unfair, and we're going to do it anyway. You know why? Because we can. Because we have the power. Tough. They basically said that, although they didn't have the courage to say it quite that directly. In that case, it's like, okay. Like sometimes with our kids. Now, sometimes kids will whine and complain. It's unfair, it's unfair, it's unfair. But like sometimes when my older daughter says to me, hey, how come my younger daughter, she gets to do something? Yep, you're right. That's not fair. You know what? We changed our mind. Now we think differently because you're older and she's younger and life's changed and you're doing it. So she's doing it. Get over it. And I don't mean to be insensitive about it, but just be aware of fairness and lack of fairness and be able to acknowledge it, but to do everything we possibly can to try to create things to be as fair for the people around us, for our families, for our teams, for our friends, for our communities, for our sports, for our politics. Like, this matters. And my hope, my intention As much as I want Joe Biden to win the election here in America, absolutely, I want our election to be fair. I want everybody who wants to vote to get to vote. I want all the votes to be counted. If you have not voted yet, please vote. If you don't already, make sure you have a plan to vote. If you've already voted and or you have a plan, support other people to make sure that they vote. This is the most important election of our lifetime. I believe that. I know everyone says that every election, but it really is. So let's vote. Let's do everything we can to hold the leaders around us accountable so that this election is as fair as possible. And let's operate with a sense of fairness and integrity in our lives, in our work, in our families, in our communities, in how we show up as citizens. It's super important, especially right now. Thanks for joining. If you joined live, awesome to have you on here. If you're watching the video of this after the fact, thanks for doing that. Again, feel free to leave comments or questions in the comments section, whether you're on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube. I appreciate it. I'll be back on next week, probably Wednesday or Thursday after the election, just to check in and see how we're all doing and talk about whatever happens and where we're at. But feel free to stay in touch with me here on whichever platform you're watching this on, or at our website, which is mike-robbins.com. Take care.